Good morning, YouTubers. I'm Dan Kaplan, the chair of the Montgomery County Consumer Protection Advisory Committee to the County Executive.
I'm Wolfgang Ludwigs. I'm on the advisory committee as well. And since about 8 years, I'm working as a real estate agent for Long & Foster.
I'm a mortgage lender with 33 years experience, and we're here today to really sort of preach what Cy Sims of Sims Department Stores used to preach. An educated consumer is our best customer. And we want to open this up to questions. Both of us are going to have a brief statement talking a little bit about the home buying process from Wolfgang's perspective as a realtor, from my perspective as a lender, to help walk you through the process that can be very challenging to those that aren't familiar with it. But it really, if you're using the right team and the right people, can be a very user-friendly system to help everybody achieve that's worthy of achieving the dream of home ownership in America. Do you want to talk a little bit about the home buying process and working with
I'll be happy to.
Professional realtor?
On my licenses, I'm holding licenses in Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. It says I'm a salesperson, but I don't feel like a salesperson because I'm not selling anything. I think my role is to help people in the real estate process, whether they are buying, selling, renting, and I like to call myself a real estate advisor because selling, buying, it's a complicated, lengthy process. Our contracts nowadays have about 50 to 70 pages, and the consumer has to make a lot of choices. So I see my role in helping the consumer to explain the options, to explain the consequences of certain choices, and to help him make decisions which are best for him. So in order to structure the process, I'm used to working a 6-step approach. For example, for a purchaser, it would start with financing that Dan is going to talk about, and then I would give total access to the market. I would help negotiate the best price and the best conditions. I would make sure that the transaction is worry-free, that nothing will be forgotten, no deadline will be missed, and I'll be working as a trusted advisor through the whole process.
And Wolfgang is exactly right. I think the process in many ways starts with talking to a lender, but the process really starts from square one with finding a realtor that you're going to trust, have a good working relationship with, that's knowledgeable of the market in which you're interested in potentially buying in. A good realtor, the first thing you're going to say or ask is have you been pre-approved or pre-qualified? Have you met or talked with a lender? And this is building your team, your advising team, because you don't want to look at homes that are, for example, priced at $400,000 when you might only qualify for a home at $300,000. So it's very important to get the whole process off on the right foot, and that starts with talking to a qualified mortgage lender like me. The loan approval process is really broken down into 4 segments. Anybody's loan gets approved based on these 4 criteria, and they are income, assets, credit, and security. We don't have enough time to go into the details of these 4 criteria, but that's why it's worth setting up a time to talk with a lender that you want to work with to go over those 4 criteria. Again, income, you want to learn how much money you make, and relationship to how much money you make, what your debts are. Assets. And that's generally, and I don't mean this literally cash, but money in the bank. Money readily available for you to use as your down payment and to cover your closing costs. And as lenders, we tend to be a little bit on the conservative side. We like to see that you have a little bit of money left over after closing for that rainy day. Credit. And we already have some questions that have been asked. There are going to be other questions, I'm sure, from both the audience and from YouTube viewers. But credit is a big thing, and that along with your income is something that is within your control. We look at credit scores, we look at credit history, we look at your credit report to make sure that you are not getting into a situation that's over your head and that you will in fact qualify for the mortgage. And then the fourth is security. A mortgage by definition is a secured loan. It is secured by your home. You are the homeowner, but there's a security interest. A lender has the right, no different than a bank does when you get car financing. It's your car, but if you don't make the payments, the bank has the right to take that asset from you. What I'd like to do is, because we have a handful of people here in the room with us, I see some title people, I see some other lenders, I see some very smart-looking, intelligent consumers. So I'd like to first open it up to any questions that any of you might have. We've already been given some questions that we're here and ready to answer, and then we'll open it up to whoever might be young. From the audience,
Please go ahead.
any questions?
Ask your questions.
The question not asked is the only bad question, so
You
feel free to ask.
may be asking, how do I find the right real estate agent? Well, my general advice is use a local lender, use a local agent, because he has local knowledge. But besides that, ask your friends. Maybe you have a name in your neighborhood, your neighbor can give you a recommendation, and then interview agents. Ask them. And don't just interview one, interview 2 or 3 and find out who is the one who responds to your questions, who understands your wants and needs.
We have a question from Steve M. who asks, I would like some tips on how to sell and buy a home at the same time. I don't want 2 mortgages at the same time. I live in Montgomery County and plan on moving to St. Augustine, Florida. Is there a better time than others to sell? Well, first of all, I'm sorry to see you leave Montgomery County, because it's a great place. Second of all, my best friend lives in St. Augustine, so you're really going to a nice place as well. But the answer to the question that you're really asking is how can you purchase a new home if you don't have enough money to just pay outright cash for it? And there are loan types available. Most commonly, it's a bridge loan. And what that loan does is it literally bridges you until your current home sells. It's generally not a long-term solution, but can get you in the short term into the new property, whether it's here in Montgomery County or Florida or wherever it might be. And what that loan does is it secures both properties so that you have to make a payment. I will tell you, generically speaking, bridge loans tend to be on the expensive side, and they're usually not long-term. But there is a way to accomplish the goal that you're trying to achieve with the nature of your question.
My advice is start your selling process first. And if you already have a ratified contract, it usually takes 4 or 5 weeks till closing, you can start your buying process. Then it makes sense. But if you really haven't done anything about selling, I would not advise to go into the purchasing.
And then the second part of his question is there a better time than others to sell? If you asked, I think, 10 realtors or 10 lenders, you get 30 different answers to that question. On the flip side, I really love from Thanksgiving through the end of January for buyers, because there are generally fewer buyers out there. So particularly in a seller's market, which we are in, at least in Montgomery County, with low inventory, it gives buyers a little bit more of a, I don't want to say an advantage, but it makes it a little bit easier for them in a seller's market. From the standpoint of selling, I think it really depends on a seller's individual needs or wants or desires or situation. So it's really hard to say. But generally, any one of the 12 months is a pretty good time to sell. It really depends on what your needs are.
Are there any other questions? Please go ahead.
Okay, so you have a lender, a realtor. Now you want to make an offer. How do you make? What is the best way to make a great offer?
Well, you want to know what is a good offer price, and you should ask your real estate agent, look at the market for me, check it out, find out what sold in the past, which homes did not sell, they were probably too expensive, compare homes, but don't compare apple and pears. Try to compare the right ones, and then you work your way to a reasonable offer price. Usually, the seller may be able to compromise a little bit with you, but not too much, because if you go too low, the seller may turn you down right away, and then you are clueless. Also, you have to consider, am I in competition? Are there other offerers? Ask your real estate agent, he will try to find out for you.
And to just expand upon your question, because it's a very good question, is, and I'm going to say this repeatedly, it's very important that you, the consumer, build your team. Build your team, as Wolfgang alluded to, as advisors and trusted partners during this process. For 99% of the public, the purchase of a home will be the single biggest asset that they ever own. And for that same 99% of the public, a mortgage will be the single biggest debt they ever incur. If I take my car into the shop, an auto mechanic can tell me that my right widget needs a ventricle bypass jigamajug, and I wouldn't know the difference. I'm not well educated in this. Most people are not well educated in the home buying process. So what I do is I try to go to a mechanic that I trust, I feel is knowledgeable, and understands the process. You have to build that team yourself. And in many ways, the realtor is the captain of that team. You know, if you picture a team being almost like an octopus with 8 different arms, and sometimes there are more, sometimes there are less, but that realtor is right in the middle and is oftentimes in a very good position to make recommendations for a good lender, for a good title company, for a good home inspector, for a good moving company, and for all the various components that you might not be thinking of as you just delve into what can be an overwhelming process.
I almost always agree with Dan, as you have probably found out already, but I don't like the idea of being a captain, because actually the consumer makes all the decisions. So I'm just the advisor, I'm helping, but the final responsibility rests with the consumer.
And I do agree with that. And that goes back to what I said before. You will see that I tend to repeat myself, whereby an educated consumer really is our best customer. It's our jobs to educate. And so that's first and foremost what we have to do. And then in terms of the lending world, what type of loan? How long the loan should be, 10 years, 15 years, 20, 30 years. You know, those types of decisions based on good information that we provide you should be able to help you make an informed decision. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Good. We saw other hands. Did you have a, no? Okay, then we'll go to a question that Vanessa B asks. What if you're a veteran with a certificate of eligibility or are able to get one to buy a home or townhome or condo? Is the certificate acceptable? Is there down payment needed anyway and income requirements? Again, a great question. To anybody that is a veteran, I first thank you for your service to this country. You deserve a tremendous thank you and pat on the back. One of the benefits of either being in active duty or being a vet is that through the Veterans Administration, there are lending programs that apply only to veterans. Part of the question gets a little technical with the certificate of eligibility. That means that you are in fact a veteran, or for that matter, active duty, and that you are eligible for these VA benefits. Part of the benefits of a VA loan is that it's one of the few loan programs that exists still today where you can put no money down. So it's a tremendous benefit. Again, in Montgomery County, that can go up to in excess of $700,000. So you're not just talking about $20,000 or $50,000 or $75,000 loans. You're talking about smaller loan amounts all the way up to big loan amounts. And it depends on making sure that that eligibility exists. If, for example, you own a home now where you've used that eligibility has to be restored by paying off the existing mortgage that's tying up the eligibility. every lender, and by the way, the Veterans Administration, even though this is a VA loan, is not the one that approves or rejects the loan. They're not the one that come up with all of the rules which lenders call underwriting guidelines. But they do have a set track of guidelines that in order to be eligible for a VA loan must be met. Lenders, qualified lenders, will only underwrite, will only originate these loans based on those criteria and any others that the lender might come up with. So it's important to realize that what the Veterans Administration really does is it provides an insurance, a protection for the lender in the case of default. So long as all of their guidelines are met, the lender has their own set of rules and guidelines, which goes to the question about a down payment. Even if you take out a VA loan and you want to put a down payment down, you're certainly able to do so. But so long as you're within the maximum loan limits of a particular jurisdiction, you may or may not have to or want to. And as far as the income requirements, there are income requirements, and I would recommend that Vanessa talk to an individual lender because that can vary from lender to lender. We have a series of questions from Kumar V.
Kumar.
Yes, he had 4 questions,
Yeah.
so we're going to take them one at a time. Why don't you go first? His last question, but we'll do it first, is how is
dual agency even legal, he asks. A real estate agent who is working for the seller has a conflict of interest, and his or her firm should not also represent the buyer. But from what I've heard, agents routinely get the buyer to sign a waiver. How is this allowed?
Why don't you define dual agency first so that we make sure everybody knows what it is.
Dual agency is handled a little bit different in Maryland, DC, and Virginia. Maryland has a very strict regulation. A real estate agent cannot be a dual agent. It is excluded. Now, if a consumer signs the dual agency form and agrees to it, it means that the broker is the dual agent, but not the real estate agent.
And the broker is sort of a person in each designated realtor's office that handles matters like that.
Yeah. I would see a little difference between a very small brokerage that has a very little local business, and I could understand that the consumer is concerned about his transaction and if all the confidentiality is kept. But a large broker, like for example Long & Foster, who has a market share of more than 30%, that is a different situation. And if a consumer said, I do not want dual agency, then I would have to tell him, well, there is 30% of the market that I cannot show to you. Is this really in your best interest? So the consumer has to decide in every individual situation what really is best for him. Any follow-up to that, dual agency? Any more questions?
Kumar also asks, and not that it's been a rough career, but I didn't need reading glasses when I started this 33 years ago. How can I view my credit score without having to pay for it? It seems that the mainstream companies charge for it. I've also seen that offers on the internet for free credit scores are these scams. Well, you have to be careful. The honest answer really is that there are many resources available to the consumer today, probably more than ever before, that allow you to see and view your credit, including your credit score. I'm not going to pitch any one of them. Most are good, but there are some scams out there, so you have to be careful, particularly in light of the fact that you're going to expose your Social Security number. A Social Security number is required and needed in order to get somebody's credit report. If you're doing your homework up front, like we suggested, talking to a realtor, talking to a lender, even before you start to look at the first property that you might be interested in, I don't think it's necessary for you to get your credit report. Because as a lender, that's going to be one of the first things that I do. So we're going to get the credit report for you, and we're going to share with you the information that's on it, including the credit scores. Now, if you go to some of the credit companies that advertise on TV or radio or on the internet, you can get your credit report, oftentimes free, and they will give you a credit score. This sort of jumps ahead to one of his future questions, but there are actually 3 credit scores that an individual gets. And if you're purchasing a home, let's say with a spouse or a partner, each of you get 3. They're generally close, and they can range anywhere from the mid 400s to about, I think the highest is 850, 875, something like that. Anything above 740 is considered valedictorian A++. Anything still over 700 is considered very good credit. Anything over 680 is considered good credit. Anything over 620 is oftentimes considered acceptable credit. And once you get below 620, it starts to get a little rough. It usually indicates that you've had some credit issues in the past. We can do loans under certain loan programs with a credit score as low as 580, but there have to be reasons. There have to be overriding issues. For example, a very large down payment, or while the credit might be bad, the debt and income ratios that I alluded to before are very good. So there have to be compensating factors, but oftentimes we can go down to a score as low as 580. But clearly, the higher the score, the better. I never want to speak for other lenders, but the general rule of thumb, I know it's with the company I work with, and the general rule of thumb within the industry is that we see 3 credit scores and we take the middle score. Not the average, not the mean, not the middle, but literally the middle. So that if somebody has a credit score of 720, 699, and 480, the credit score that would be used for purposes of this loan would be 699. It's whatever that middle score is of the 3. Oftentimes lenders will charge for a credit report, but only at the point where the loan actually closes. It'll be part of the closing costs. Some do, some don't. Again, it varies. I wouldn't make a decision as to which lender to use based on just that. There are more significant factors because you're usually looking in the $40 range that a lender would charge. Again, be careful because there are scams out there. The sad part is most businesses, most people are decent, good people just trying to do the job that they're out to do. It's the 5% or 10% that are scams that sort of ruin it for everybody else. So please be careful, especially anytime giving out your social security number or emailing your social security number. But be careful of the scams. Talk to some professionals, talk to your friends, talk to relatives that maybe have gone through the process to get some of these referrals to help you out. And that leads really to his next question, where he asks, for security reasons, I dislike having to transmit my social security number through the internet. So I'm reluctant to use online sources for finding my credit score. Any suggestions? That's a tough one. I mean, that really is a tough one because by definition, the credit report is going to be run on somebody's computer. Okay, so that at some point during that process, your social security number is going to, in fact, be exposed. Again, with the company I work with, we have encrypted and very secured lines so as to add protection. But if Target and Marriott can get hacked, anybody can get hacked. And I'm not picking on Target or Marriott. It's the real world. So you do have to be very careful. I will tell you, on the credit reports that I see, so I'm assuming this is industry-wide, but I can't attest to that. But on the credit reports that I see, it lists all of your credit. Car loans, student loans, credit cards. But while it might list that you're with XYZ Credit Union or ABC Bank or 123 credit card, it never lists your entire account number. It leaves at least a few digits out as one step of added security. So hopefully that can put your mind a little bit more at ease. And just to be fair, Kumar also asked, which credit score is most used by mortgage companies? I've heard FICO, but now it appears there are several others, TransUnion, Experian. I've also read that FICO has 3 types of credit scores. It's very confusing. And it is. But really, I think I addressed that when I said we generally use the middle score, but we have to get 3. Any questions coming in? Sharon?
How do I pick a home inspector?
The question is, how do I pick a home inspector?
It's a good one. If you have found a real estate agent already, you can ask him, and he will certainly be able to give you a recommendation. Also here applies what I said earlier. Use someone who is local, who's not too far away, because if he has to drive many miles to do your home inspection, he will charge for it. It will be a little bit more expensive. And then also, if your neighbor, for example, just bought a house and can give you a recommendation, this will be another good source. And then the internet is always good for research. And I suggest to ask a company that does home inspection for a sample report. Let them send you a report and you take a look, and if you like the paperwork, if you like the way they do it, they organize it, that's probably the right company for you.
And you said something interesting. The internet is a good source for information. I couldn't agree with you more. But because it's on the internet, it ain't gospel. You know, my kids for years thought, well, it was on the internet, so it's got to be true. It doesn't necessarily mean it's true. It might be, but it might not be. I have found, my experience is that people that generally use some of these online type services, whether it's a realtor, whether it's a lender, whatever, generally do not get the same level of customer service that working with human beings do. It is still a people process. It is still a person-to-person business. And the problem is that while big internet companies can have tremendous economies of scale and streamline processes, so can the old-fashioned brick and mortar shops as well. And by that I mean, or the concern I have is that I always sort of joke with my borrowers. I tell them that they start the process off with a credit balance of 1 million questions. And I've yet to ever have a buyer or a borrower use up all million questions. But if you're using just an online service, an online mortgage company, for example, and you have a question, you're never going to get to the same human being twice for an answer. And that oftentimes breeds to getting 2 different answers to the same question. That's true on the realtor side, that's true on the lending side, that's true on the title side, that's true on many aspects of this process we call home buying. So it's a good starting point, but it's not the be all and end all. And I think it's still important to have a realtor advisor. I'm not calling you a captain now,
a
realtor advisor
person that is available.
Right, to help you and to take your phone call and to meet with you and shake your hand and look you square in the eye and say, this is the best advice I can give you. Yes, ma'am. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to know for first-time home buyers, what are the best type of mortgage? I
am so glad you asked, because I am telling you, we were handed some questions that came in earlier, and that was the exact great minds think alike. Being a first-time home buyer has tremendous benefits. The state recognizes the importance of it, and therefore the closing costs, some of them you don't have to pay for as a first-time home buyer. That's number one. We are very fortunate here in Maryland. DC has some very good programs. Virginia has some very good programs. But here in Maryland, we have some incredible first-time home buyer programs. They are run through the state with local lenders. Some participate, others don't. And they have a whole flurry of type of loan programs. I want to share just one with you to show you how spectacular it can be. A couple of years ago, Governor Hogan created this program to help first-time home buyers. For a first-time home buyer, the biggest challenge is coming up with the down payment that's necessary. And the second biggest challenge is qualifying for a mortgage because young people have so much student debt. Under this program called Smart Buy 2.0, if you, and I'm not going into the qualifying, I'm giving you literally a very generic overview of the program. Talk to your local lender about the specifics, okay? But under this program, if you have up to $30,000 worth of student loan debt, that student loan debt can be paid off at the same time you purchase the home. Gone. And it's paid off by the state. The way it works is that under this loan program, you must, as the home buyer, put down 5%. So it's not one of these that it's no money down. And then what happens is, and I'm just going to use simple numbers, sales price is $100,000, the loan amount is $95,000. But let's say you have $25,000 of student loan debt. At the time you go to settlement, that's when you become the actual legal owner of the home. The state will put a second mortgage on your house. And I'm going to use the $25,000. I'm going to keep the math simple. I'm going to use the $25,000 in student loan debt. So long as you have that mortgage, and so long as you still occupy that home as your primary residence, every year for the first 5 years, the state will write off 20% of that second trust. You never have to make a payment on it. So you don't make monthly payments on it, and yet it over 5 years goes away. 20% a year over 5 years means it's gone. So that at the end of year one, let's say you decide to sell the house. The balance that's owed on that second trust is $20,000, no longer $25,000. When you sell that house at the end of the first year, you have to pay off the $20,000. But if, let's say, you keep that house all 5 years, it's gone. You never make a payment. You've paid your mortgage down. You can sell your house for whatever you can get for it, pay off the mortgage, and move on. It's a wonderful program. It doesn't necessarily help with the down payment because you do have to have 5% down. And you can buy any property, residential property, within the state of Maryland. There is a similar program called the Smart Buy 1.0 that allows you to pay up to $60,000 worth of student loan debt, but it restricts the type of properties that you can buy. So again, that's the importance of talking to a lender, talking to a realtor, talking to the title company, because depending on what your situation is, there's a pigeonhole. My parents and grandparents' generation went to the savings and loan down the street, and they said, we're going to buy a house in your neighborhood. And they took out a 20-year loan. And at the end of 20 years, they had a party. They invited everybody over. They had some food and drink. And they took the mortgage. They took a pack of matches. They lit the mortgage. And and I'm not trying to be funny, it was a mortgage burning party. That rarely happens today. And sort of the sad part is you never get the mortgage burning party. But the good news is, as consumers today, you have far more choices that our parents and grandparents never had in the world of financing. There are different types of loan programs available. And again, working with people that you're comfortable with that are experts in their chosen field will help to advise you. It's ultimately your decision, but will help to advise you as to what is best for you. Is a fixed rate mortgage the best type of loan for you? Is an adjustable rate mortgage where the rate can go up or down best for you? Talk to us and we'll advise you.
I also have a little advice for first-time home buyers. Make sure your realtor has time for you, has time to sit down and explain, answer your questions. There may be some people who want to rush you into signing papers. Don't use them. Use someone who really has time for you and answers everything straightforward and is patient.
And I would expand that not just to first-time home buyers. I would expand that whether you're a first-time home buyer, second, third, fourth. You know, we don't get paid by the hour. We get paid to provide you good service. And so a lender or a realtor or a title person or an inspector should never be too busy. You are still the customer. Going back to the first-time home buyer program, I gave you one example. There are other examples. I talked earlier before about VA loans being one of the few loans that you don't have to put any money down. There are programs under first-time home buyer within the state of Maryland where it's also true you don't have to put any money down. And while under some loan programs you might have to put money down, within Montgomery County specifically, there are programs that offer you grants. The city of Gaithersburg, for example, has a grant program. The county has something called an MPDU program. There are all sorts of options and opportunities for you. And if we learned anything from the Great Recession of 2009, it is that homeownership is not for everybody, but it is for a lot of people. It is part and parcel of the American dream. And I think the best thing to do is to start talking to people like Wolfgang or me or others to see if homeownership really is in your financial best interest, and then decide whether you want to move forward.
Yeah, in closing, I would say it is not so difficult to find homes. There are fabulous web pages, many of them, and they show you homes. The challenge is to get through the process, and I think that's where you should use help. I was sitting next to someone on a plane. He was on a very popular web page, and I looked over and I said, "Are you going to work with them?" And he said, no. When I really go forward and buy, I work with a real broker company. I don't want to give any names here, but this is how many people feel.
I want to jump 40 years because we've talked about first-time home buyers, and first-time home buyers can be of any age. But I want to talk a little bit about seniors. One of the questions that we received, are there any mortgage loan programs geared towards senior citizens? And the answer is absolutely, positively yes. Most commonly referred to as reverse mortgages. Reverse mortgages got sort of a bum rap, maybe with a little bit of merit, but not so much, several years ago. And you'll see these advertised on TV by big name TV and movie celebrities. But there are a whole bunch of local lenders right here in Montgomery County that offer these types of mortgages. What most people don't realize is that a reverse mortgage can be used to purchase a home. The first requirement under a reverse mortgage is that you must be at least age 62 or older. Okay, it's not available to you until you reach 62. There are a bunch, and I mean a bunch, of other requirements. So again, I'm not going to go into the specifics. Talk to a qualified lender who knows reverse mortgages, because the reverse mortgages rules are very different than most other rules. But there are situations where under a reverse mortgage, you, the home buyer, or if you're in a house and just can't afford it anymore, could refinance with a reverse mortgage, may never have to make a mortgage payment again on your home, ever. And the home is never taken away from you. Under a different set of situations, albeit similar, there are situations where every month the bank can send you money as an advance on your reverse mortgage. So that if you need a little bit of extra money to cover home health care costs, or your retirement just isn't covering it all for you, you could actually get a check, $1,000, $5,000, $200, whatever the number might be, every month to supplement your income. It is a wonderful tool, again, if it's used appropriately. If used appropriately. Again, it's not for everybody age 62 and older, but it might be for somebody, and it is. They've become very popular again. Another question, and this is sort of a generic question, I'm just sort of checking these off as they come in. What types of mortgage loans are available, and what are the differences in each type of loan? Again, I could spend an entire day answering that question. I'll spare you. But in a nutshell, there are really a couple of different types of loans. There are government loans and conventional loans. Government loans really primarily fall into one of three categories. Those loans that are insured by USDA, FHA, which is part of HUD, or VA. We talked a little bit about VA loans. All other loans are conventional loans. Now, and each loan program has its pluses and minuses or has its own idiosyncrasies. So again, dealing with a professional is they are there to advise you on what you feel is the best loan program for you. Again, we have choices our parents and grandparents never had. Whether it's a government loan or a conventional loan, there can be loans where they amortize. That means how long does it take if you make each payment on time? How long does it take to pay off the loan completely? They range generally from 15 to 30 years. A 15-year loan will generally have a lower interest rate than a 30-year loan, but it will also have a higher payment. So I'm getting even tired of how much I'm repeating myself. Talk to your lender about what's best for you, and you then can decide. Also, and nothing is ever easy. I told you there are two types, government and conventional. But within those two types, there are subcategories. Within those subcategories, there are two more subcategories, fixed rate or adjustable rate. Fixed rate means that the interest rate on your mortgage will never change as long as you have that loan. Whether it's 15 years or 30 years, it will never change. Now, your payment can change regardless of which type you have, because generally your mortgage payment includes your taxes, the real estate taxes, and your homeowner's insurance. And real estate taxes generally do go up. Insurance premiums generally go up. So the payment itself can change, but the principal and interest portion, which is truly the loan payment, never will change. On the other hand, there are adjustable rate mortgages, oftentimes referred to as ARMs. Under an ARM, the lender will say that the rate is fixed for a finite period of time, most commonly 5, 7, or 10 years. Now, why would somebody do that? Generally in exchange for sharing what happens to the risk of what happens to an interest rate, you will get a discounted rate early on, again, for the first 5 years or 7 years or 10 years. So for somebody that says, I'm only going to be here in this house for 3 to 4 years, the first thing I would bring up is, let's talk about a 5-year ARM, where the rate is fixed for the first 5 years. It then becomes adjustable each year thereafter. And they're generally 30-year terms. Why? If you're in the house for 4 years and only have that mortgage for 4 years, and you can get a lower rate on a 5-year ARM than you can on a 30-year fixed, it's as if you had a fixed rate mortgage. You might be able to save an eighth or a quarter or 0.5%. So there are, again, two types of mortgages with lots underneath to help you go that way. And again, I could argue the pros and the cons of any one of them, because they're not necessarily good or bad. It's what's really best for your individual needs. I don't want to keep going to the questions I've been fed. So if there are any questions.
Does income at some point rule you out in terms of loans? Like, should you just not even look, or if there's something out there for everybody, you should, make that assumption? If you're generally higher.
I wouldn't make the assumption.
Okay.
I'm actually doing a loan right now for a person who is a music director at a church. And all he has told me is, I make hardly any money. I won't be able to qualify or anything, but I was told to talk to you. he qualifies. No, he's not qualifying for $1 million house, but he is qualifying for homes in the $200,000 to $250,000 range, much to his pleasantness surprise. So I never say never. Talk to us. But as important as it is to talk to us, also come up with a budget for yourself. If, for example, you're renting now and you're paying $1,500 in rent and you're struggling, don't think that you're going to be able to now afford $2,000 a month in a mortgage payment. And I chose my words carefully. Everybody in this audience looks pretty intelligent, maybe except you, but everybody looks intelligent. You can only decide how much you can afford. I can't tell you that. I really can't. I can tell you how much you'll qualify for under what type of loan program you want to apply. And those numbers can be the same or they can be very different. So it is worth talking to us about your individual circumstances. Would you like to be on YouTube and now tell us how much you make and everything? No, just kidding. But
you can also ask your real estate agent, make a comparison for me. I'm paying so and so much in rent right now. So if I pay the same amount or maybe just a little bit more, could I buy? Is it enough? And what volume will it probably be? Which house, 200, 250, 400, what category? You can ask your realtor, he will have an answer.
One other question?
sure.
What if you're in?
I told you you have a credit of 1 million questions, so this is only number 2.
Oh, yeah, well, I'm gonna hit my max right now. What if you're interested in properties with larger pieces of land? Like, I've heard the term farmlets, those small farms with the attached. Is there anything special you should look in terms of loans or realtors, specific branches? Anything come to mind in terms of that?
You're talking about farmland with.
Yeah, not, intensive, but at least 2 to 3 acres, I would say, a pretty old home, from.
Well, it has to be designated for construction. I mean, otherwise farmland is farmland, you can't build there. So you need a building permit. That's the first step.
If it's already a home established, though, there is nothing extra, it's just like looking for a normal home with a smaller, plot of land. And all that.
From a lending standpoint, it generally, I don't want to say doesn't matter, but it raises certain questions, okay? And again, I'm being very general now. As lenders, we generally don't like to see the value of the land be worth more than 1/3 of the total value, okay? So again, if you're purchasing a $100,000 home, generally we like to see the value of land at $30,000. But again, as much as that's a guideline, there are that many exceptions. But really, to your question, it really goes to the issue of how is the home or how is the property zoned? If it is zoned, use the term farm. If it's zoned agricultural, that generally will preclude me as a residential lender from getting financing, except possibly in the case of a USDA loan. And there is, and I'm trying to think of the name of it, the Farm Agricultural Land Cooperative or something. There is a quasi-government agency in every state that really helps people that are purchasing farmland. Now, just because you're buying a home that might be on 3 acres does not in and of itself mean that it's a farm. Again, for people familiar with Montgomery County, you can go to the outskirts of the county and find some beautiful homes that might be on 3, 4, 5 acres, and it's anything but a farm. You just got a lot of grass to cut in the summertime. So again, it really depends. Okay.
So how about doing some closing remarks? What do you think?
Okay. What would you like to say?
Well, I would like to say that consumers should talk to their local lender, to their local real estate agent. They should ask their questions as you did today, and make sure you get good answers. If someone gives you vague answers, stay away from them. look for someone who gives you answers that are right on the dot. And thank you for your attention.
We really appreciate your time. It's been a pleasure here. Hopefully this got everybody started on thinking about home buyership and to be safe. Again, an educated consumer is our best customer. The only dumb question is the one not asked. So we're here for you. The county really has a tremendous stake in consumer protection. The people in the office are there really to be your safeguard and to be your help and take advantage of them. It's a pleasure to be on the committee that advises them and works with them, and they are here for you as we are on a real estate transaction. Good luck. Thank you.